Okay, so Boker Tov, today's Daf Yomi is Kiddushin Mem Daled, Kiddushin 44, but we're going to start on the bottom of Mem Gimel and Mebez, around 15 lines from the bottom. It says, Ha'ish Mekadesh Espito. We learned in the Mishnah that a man is allowed to marry off his daughter when she's a Katana or a Nara. When she's Katana is a minor under the age of 12, and Nara is between the age of 12 and 12 and a half. And then the third stage is when she's an adult of Bogeris. So he can marry off his daughter when she's a Nara. So we learned in the Mishnah in Gittin, Mishnah tells us, Nara Murasa, if the girl is a Nara, if she's between the age of 12 and 12 and a half, where she has some rights, but her father still has jurisdiction over her. So there, Nara Murasa, Hiva Via Mekablan Eskita. So the Mishnah in Gittin says that when it comes to a Nara who's betrothed, both she and her father can accept the get. And Amar Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says, Ein shtei yadayim zochos ke'echad. You can't have two people who have authority over an act. You can't have two separate hands. Ela via mekabel eskita. Only her father can receive the get. Number two, v'kol she'en yachol l'shmor eskita, en yachol eskarish. And now we have a separate law in the Mishnah. Anybody who's not able to guard the get is not able to be divorced. So if a little girl who doesn't understand what a get is, she would not be able to be divorced. And says Rish Lakish, K'machokas l'gerushin. Rish Lakish says just like there's a machokas between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda with respect to divorce. Rabbi Yehuda says the girl can't receive the divorce if she's a Nara, only the father can. So too, there's a machokas by betrothal, whether or not the girl is also able to accept the betrothal while she's a Nara, or just the father can do it. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, I disagree with Rish Lakish. Machokas l'gerushin. The dispute is only by divorce. Of all Kiddushin, but when it comes to betrothal, even the Rabbanan, the Tanna Kama of the Mishnah in Gittin would say that only the father could accept the divorce and not here. So in our case, in our Mishnah, the father can accept her betrothal for the Nara, but not the girl herself who's a Nara. So the Amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. So now Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina wants to explain what's the reasoning for Rabbi Yochanan. My time with Rabbi Yochanan, what's the reason why Rabbi Yochanan says that when it comes to Nara, the Tanna Kama says that the Nara, when it comes to Kiddushin, the Nara cannot accept the betrothal, only the father. My time with Rabbi Yochanan, I'll leave with Rabbanan. He says, Gerushin, he says, when it comes to divorce, when it comes to a case of divorce, there when she's getting divorced, she's going into her father's domain. Then both she or her father can accept the betrothal, the divorce. And the reason is because when it comes to divorce, we're going to say that when it comes to divorce, we're saying that it's for her father's advantage that she accepts the get. So therefore, both she and her father can accept the get because he's coming into her domain, but she's coming into his domain. But Kiddushin, the Mafkas, that's Mamir Shesavia, but betrothal, where she's leaving her father's domain, then we're going to say it's not to her father's advantage, so he doesn't want her to accept the betrothal. So Avia Vuohi, only her father can accept it, and she can't accept it. That's what Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says. It's the logic of Rabbi Yochanan in explaining the Rabbanan that there's a distinction between betrothal and divorce, but what the Nara can do. So the Gemara says, but really, is that true? Barei Mamar. What about the case of Mamar? Mamar is a case where a woman falls to Yibum. Her husband dies, and she falls to his brothers in Yibum. And she was falling to Yibum from the stage of the Erusin, from the stage of betrothal. And we say in that case, so she had fallen back into her father's stage, into her father's jurisdiction, but by accepting the Kiddushin of the Mamar, of the Yibum, of one of the brothers, that's called Mamar. So when she accepts this Kiddushin, she takes herself out of her father's domain. The Tanan, and we learned at the top of 44a, Ketana Mene Yerusin, Eno Simba Mamar, El Midah Safia, that if she was a minor, she can only do mimer with the consent of her father. Nara, but it says explicitly that this woman who is in Nara, this 12 to 12 and a half year old, she can even do without her father's consent. She can do it on her own. So therefore, the Gemara says, we see from here that this is a question against the logic of as Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina explains Rabbi Yochanan, because even though she's leaving her father's domain, we're still going to allow her to accept the mimer. And so therefore the Gemara says, if Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina taught something, this is what he taught. He taught the following. Amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, my time with Rabbi Yochanan. What's the reason why Rabbi Yochanan says that according to the rabbis, she cannot accept the Kiddushin? What's the reasoning? Kiddushin the midaita avia avlohi. Since Kiddushin requires the consent of the person who's being betrothed, i.e., in this case, it's the father, because the father has to consent. Therefore, since it's requiring her father's consent, then, or the das makna, the one who is handing over something, meaning saying either the woman or her father, she's handing over her status. So therefore, since it requires her das, then it can only be her father. Avia v'lohi. Rashi says, Torah zichto, the Torah gave the father the right, but by divorce that can happen against her will, then it could be either she or her father. Because why do we need? We don't need das. We don't need intelligence anymore. Because since she could be divorced against his will, and so therefore it doesn't matter who accepts it, she or her father. But Gerushin, the Balkarcha, bein avia, that since the divorce can happen against her will, it's either her, she, her, or father. So the Gemara challenges this. But what about the fact that mimer? Mimer is dimidaita. Doesn't mimer require consent? The katani bein avia, but the case of mimer requires consent, and it can happen either from her or her father. So the Gemara explains, Hasam b'maimer de Balkarcha. No, in the case where we're referring to above, in the brayso above, where it says that the mimer can happen with her, that the mimer can happen when she's a nara. So there we're talking about a case where it was against her will, the Rebbe, and follows the position of Rebbe. That Rebbe's position is, Rashi tells us, that mimer works even against her will. Rashi says the example of mimer against her will is if he just throws her the money and says, "You're betrothed to me." In the case of mimer, Tanya osa mimer b'yavama, so shalomi daita. If you do mimer on the yavama against her consent, Rebbe says kana. Rebbe says it works. So we see from here that mimer is against her will. It doesn't require das, and that's why it works in the case of nara, according to Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. So my time with the Rebbe. What's the reason why Rebbe says mimer does not require consent? Gamar mi bia diavama. Because just like in general, if a woman falls to yibum, then the brother-in-law can do the yibum against her consent, but through bia. So ma bia diavama balkarcha. Just like that could be against her consent. Afachinami balkarcha. So too in this case, the mimer can happen against her consent. But why do the Chachamim say it doesn't work? The Rabbanan, why do they say mimer doesn't work against her consent? So Savri Yafina mi Kiddushin. They say we learn out mimer, but from comparing it to Kiddushin. Ma Kiddushin, just like betrothal in general, to midaita, it requires her consent. Afachinami to midaita, also a case of mimer, it requires consent. So the Gemara says, what's the dispute between Rebbe and the Rabban in this case? Rebbe says since this mimer relates to Yibam, we're going to compare it to Yibam, just like Yibam could happen against her consent, so to mimer. So Rebbe Savar Mili Yivama Miyavama Habalei Umilaf. Rabban Savri Boris, the Rabban of the position Kiddushin Habalei Umilaf, that even though mimer is under the jurisdiction of Yibam, it's really in essence about betrothal. So therefore, we can't compare it to betrothal, and so therefore, we're going to say that it requires consent. And Hachinami Mistabra, Kidamakamatara, Rabbi Yochanan, and Gemara says it's indeed logical to say, like Rabbi Yochanan said, that we say that the Rabbanan say that in the case of Nara, she cannot accept the Kiddushin she cannot accept the Kiddushin on her own. Only the father can. And it's logical to say, according to the Rabbanan, what's the logic? It says, how do we know it's like Rabbi Yochanan? I mean, Tani Seifa, from the fact that it says at the end of the Brisa, Masha Ein came B'Kiddushin. That it says in this case of Maimer that she can accept when she's a Nara, she can by Maimer, she can do it without her father's consent, but not by betrothal. Masha Ein came B'Kiddushin. Seems to be exactly like Rabbi Yochanan is saying. So therefore, it's supporting Rabbi Yochanan's position. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, well, this is a direct refutation of Reish Lakish. Name it to have it to you to the Reish Lakish. So Reish Lakish would say, no, this brisa, Amrocha Reish Lakish, Amani Rabbi Hudahi. And this brisa that says that she can do, that the Nara can do Maimer, but she can't do Kiddushin, that's found in the position of Rabbi Yehuda, which everybody says Rabbi Yehuda is of the position that Nara cannot do Kiddushin. So he says, Haman Rabbi Yehuda, Damer Ein Shtei Yadayim Zochos Kachas. Gemara says, well, if it's Rabbi Yehuda, Masha Ein Came B'Kiddushin, Masha Ein Came B'Gerushin, by the way. Well, if it's Rabbi Yehuda, why does it say that he doesn't allow this by case of betrothal? It should say he can't even allow by his case of a divorce. It's a much bigger chiddush from Rabbi Yehuda that he doesn't even allow a divorce, which can typically be done against her will. The Gemara says, "Inachinami." That's true. Rabbi Yehuda could have given that bigger chiddush that doesn't work in a case of divorce. But I did the Tani Maimer the Damil Kiddushin. So, but since the Bryce is referring to Maimer, which is similar to a case of betrothal, Tani Nami Mash Ein Kem Kiddushin. So therefore, it says also this case of that it says that it doesn't work by case of Kiddushin. Really, the bigger chiddush is that it doesn't work by divorce. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda, Ma'ishna Maimer. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say that in a case of Maimer, he allows the Nara to accept it against her will, but he doesn't allow it by a case of, in a case of Maimer, he allows the Nara to consent to accept the Maimer, but he doesn't allow it by Kiddushin or even Gerushin. Why? So Rabbi Yehuda Ma'ishna Maimer, Hov is a Kukov Omedes. Well, because by Maimer, she's already, in the case of Yibum, she already has a Zika there. She's already partially married, and so therefore we're going to allow her to accept a Maimer by herself. So the Gemara says, well, once we've said that the reason is because she's Kukov Omedes, why don't we say the following? Rabbi Yochanan Nami will take Shulchan Kara. Why don't we say that there's no question on Rabbi Yochanan from the beginning and say that Rabbi Yochanan could have given the answer? You had said that remember we had said that Rabbi Yochanan says that it's because she's mafkas midas atzma, that if she goes into her father's domain, that's the reason why he says it doesn't work by Kiddushin, but why is it working by Maimer? Why don't we just give this answer? Shani Maimer holds Kukav Omedis. We could have given just Rabbi Yochanan could have said that the case of Maimer is fundamentally different because she already has a Zika. And so therefore that's how the Gemara explains that position. So now the Gemara says another question on the position of Reish Lakish. Again, Reish Lakish had said, just like there's a dispute between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda by divorce, that the Rabbanan say she can accept it when she's a Nara. So too there is a dispute by Kiddushin where Reish Lakish says the Rabbanan say she can accept it, the betrothal while she's a Nara. So Tanana Ish Mekadesh Espito Kishi Nara Bo Bishlucho. A man can betroth his daughter when she's a Nara. He can do it himself or with his agent. So Bo Bishlucha in. So doesn't that mean he can betroth her himself and with his agent? Bo Bishlucha lo. But she cannot do it, and with her agent she can't do it. So to you, to the Reish Lakish, this dispute a refutation of Reish Lakish. So Reish Lakish would say, Hanami Rabbi Yehuda. This is the position of Rabbi Yehuda. This is also the position of Rabbi Yehuda. Our mission is the position of Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, "Umimatas mukmas laka Rabbi Yehuda." We're really going to say, that our Mishnah follows Rabbi Yehuda v'hakatani seifa? But the next clause in the Mishnah says, "Haomer leisha iskatshuli b'tamarazu." If a man says to the woman, "Betroth me with this date," and the date is not worth a pruta, and then he says, "Iskatshuli b'zu," then betroth me with this. V'amrina and mantana, and we say, who is the one who says? And we had said in the Mishnah that if one of them of those dates is worth a pruta, she's betrothed. If not, we don't combine them, because since he said by each one, Tiskachi, betrothed to me, each one, then each one is their own betrothal. So who's the one who says this position? Mantana is Kachi, that they're all separate betrothals. Amarabba, Rabbi Shimoni, that the author of that our Mishnah is Rabbi Shimon, who says Achi Omer Shvua Ko Echav Echad. And that in the case where it says, this is again, right, we turn to Rashi. Rashi says, where there are 5 people make a claim against him, and they say, give us the deposit that you have in your hand, that you're holding for us. And he says, I take an oath that I don't have in my hand, not to you, or to you, or to you. He's only going to be liable for once, unless he says, Shvua ko echad v'echad. So we see in that case that our Mishnah, that it says until, if he says it's Kachi, it's separate. So too is Rabbi Shimon, says, Shvua ko echad v'echad. Chite makul Rabbi Yehuda. I'm going to say the whole Mishnah is like Rabbi Yehuda. And in the case of the specification, Savrak Rabbi Shimon, then in the case where he specifies he's going to hold like Rabbi Shimon, that he says he has to say a shvua kol echad v'echad, and here he has to say a Kiddushin to each one. Mi Savra does Rabbi Yehuda really hold like that? Vatanan, Vatanya, but we learned Zaklau, Eno Chayav Ela Achas. But we have a specific price which says that this is the general rule, that if the person if he includes in his claim all of these, in his oath, all of these claims, he's only liable for one oath. But if he specifies it, that's the position of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says he's liable for each one, whereas Rabbi Yehuda says without adding the vav in between. That he didn't say vilu, then it's going to be as considered like he took an oath to each one of them separately, meaning to say he doesn't have to say the word shvua every single time, and so that indicates his intent. Whereas Rabbi Eliezer says Rabbi Eliezer says if he puts the shvua at the end, he's liable for every single one. But if he said at the beginning, he's only going to be liable for one oath. Whereas Rabbi Shimon says, so we see that this position, which we're trying to attribute to Rabbi Yehuda, is really Rabbi Shimon's position, not Rabbi Yehuda's position. The Gemara says, Ela kula Rabbi Shimon. So we say the whole Mishnah is Rabbi Shimon. But when it comes to the shlichus of the first part of the Mishnah, where it says that if their father can betroth her with his agent, whereas the Nara is not able to do it on her own, Sabak Rabbi Yehuda. There he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. So now the Gemara tells a little bit of a story that Rabbi Asi, Rabbi Asi did not go to the base medrash one day. He asked Rabbi Zera. So then Rabbi Zera came into him. Do you need a Gemara? There's a Gemara over here. So the Gemara says, there's a Gemara there. So Rabbi Asi lo be midrash. Ask Rabbi Zera. Amro my amor. In the Midrash. So he says, what was said today in the base medrash? He said, I also didn't go in the base medrash. I didn't hear what the Chachamim say. But Rabbi Avin would die. He said, Rabbi Avin went up. Amar Chavrusakua. So the whole people that were there said, Ki Rabbi Yochanan. They ruled like Rabbi Yochanan. Mitzavach Reish Lakish. And Reish Lakish went out screaming. Ki Kruchya. He was screaming like a bird, and he was saying no, just like the Rabbanan say by divorce that the Nara can accept it, also by a case of betrothal they're going to say that the Nara can accept it. He's going out screaming it, and nobody was listening to him. Why were they not listening to him? So one explanation is because he was screaming, and the person screaming, we don't pay attention to them. So that's why even there are a few times in the Shas where people are screaming and we don't pay attention. Amarle Rabbi Avin Bar Samchu. So Rabbi Asi said to Rabbi Zera, is Rabbi Avin somebody who can rely upon? Amarle yes, he is rely upon. We can rely upon him in this situation. Because the amount of time it took him to say it was like take the fish from the sea and stick it in the fire pan. I mean, it was immediate, and so therefore we could rely upon him. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Ana lo Rabbi Avin bar Chia v'lo Rabbi Avin bar Kahana. He says, I didn't hear this teaching in the name of Rabbi Avin bar Chia or Rabbi Avin bar Kahana. I just heard in the name of Rabbi Avin Stam. So I don't know which one it is. So the Gemara says, well, why does it matter? You know, it's Rabbi Avin. We might have Kamina. Mirma didei adidei. Well, in case there's an internal contradiction between Rabbi Avins, I want to know who it is, who he's referring to. So we saw earlier that the position of the Chachamim that is that the Nara can accept a get from her husband. So now the Gemara is going to ask the question whether, according to the Chachamim, the Nara can appoint an agent to receive her get, or maybe she only has a right to receive it herself, but she can't appoint an agent, only her father can. So that's the question the Gemara asks. Can the Nara appoint an agent to receive the get from her husband? Do we say Kiyada via Dami? Do we say that she's like her father, and just like her father can appoint an agent to receive the get, so too she? Or maybe the reason why he could divorce a Nara is because she's like the courtyard of her father, and so the courtyard can receive a get, but she can't. But the courtyard can receive a get, but she can't appoint an agent. We say Kiyada via Dami, just like the father can appoint an agent. So too she can appoint an agent. Or maybe she's like the courtyard of her father. And only once the get reaches her hands, she's not divorced. So meaning say it has to really come directly into her hands. So this is what Rava asked Rav Nachman. And the Gemara says, is Rava really in doubt about this? Rava, cost of get biyad avda yashin umishmara. So if you wrote a get and you placed it into her slave's hand, and he's sleeping and he's guarding the get, and so meaning to say the woman is the umishmarito, harez that get. So the woman is we're going to say this is a valid get because the slave is sleeping. He's like a courtyard, and the woman's watching him. And so she's acquiring it from the law of the courtyard. And so therefore she's divorced. But if he would be Neyor, if he'd be awake, ain't no get, then it would not be a get. But we see from here, Neyor Amai ain't no get. Why if he's awake, is it not considered a get? Because because we're saying that the slave is like a courtyard who's not really being watched by the woman, he's being watched by himself. And so therefore, and if the courtyard is not being watched by the owner, it's not going to be an acquisition. If you want to say that the daughter is receiving the get in this case, like under the law of the courtyard of her father, she shouldn't be divorced herself, even if it was given straight to her. Because she's like a courtyard that the father is not watching. So it must be it's obvious that the daughter is functioning as an extension of the hand of the father and not as a courtyard. Excuse me. And this is the question. Hello, is she really as strong as the father? Hold on one second. Is she really as strong as the father? Is she really as strong as the father to be able to appoint her own agent or not? That's the question that she's being asked. Hold on. That's the question that Rav is asking Rav Nachman. So Amar Lei, so Nachman responds to Rava, she's not strong enough to appoint an agent to receive the get from her husband because she doesn't have as much power as her father. What's the reason? The Ramban says because she's like an agent that the Torah appointed, because we know that the father wouldn't be upset if she would receive the get, but because in the end he could be divorced against her will, but it doesn't mean that she would have the right to appoint her own agent. So Rava says to Rav Nachman, he challenges him. What about the fact that it says in the Mishnah in Gittin, Ketana Shamar Eskabeli Gita? Giti ain't no get. If a minor says to the agent, receive my get, it's not going to be a get. Until she's actually divorced. Implies by a katana, it's no good. Hanara is a get, but by a nara, it is a get. So we see from here that the nara can appoint an agent to receive her get. So the Gemara says, talking about a case where in that case she has no father, and the Tana is teaching us that even though that since she's an orphan and she's not under the domain of the father, she can't make an agent because a minor is not able to appoint an agent. And so therefore it's not a get until it reaches her hand. And in that case, we're going to say that the Nara that has no father can appoint an agent because she's an adult. But a Nara that has a father, we would say like Rav Nachman that she can't appoint an agent. Gemara says it can't be that. Hamidiktani safe. It says in the next clause, Im Amar Avia, if he said to the father of the minor, if the father of the minor said to the agent, go out, receive a get from my daughter, and if the husband wants to change his mind and go back, he can't go back because, and he wants to cancel. If he said to the father, if the father of the minor said, go out and receive a get from my daughter from the husband, if the husband wants to cancel it and cancel the agency after he gave the get to the agent, he can't go back because the agent received it on behalf of the father, and so he's immediately divorced. But we see from Mir Miklal to Reisha, but the Yeshla Avaskin, and we see that from that case, there's a father involved. Gemara says, no, Chisuri Machzor, the Mishnah is missing words. This is what the Mishnah means. Ketana Shamra, if there's a minor girl who said, Iskabuli Giti, if there's a minor girl who says, accept my get, it's not a get, until she gets it. Ha but if she's a Nara, raise a get. But Medvar, when do we talk about the case? When she has no father. But if she would have had a father, say the Kabul Labiti Gita, if she would have a father, then once the husband gives the get to the agent, she's divorced. So now we're going to see another case where a betrothal of a minor that was done without her father's consent. In Marketana Sheniskacha. Let's say we have a minor who's betrothed without her father's consent. And when the father hears this, he's quiet. And we don't know if he agrees or not. So Amar Shmuel, Tzricha get, Utzricha miun. Shmuel says we require a get from this case, meaning to say that she's married. But at the same time, we require miun, which is normally that we need to refuse the marriage. Meaning to say it's an indication that it wasn't a marriage. If it would be a really valid biblical marriage, miun wouldn't work. Miun is the girl's refusal of the marriage. So the Gemara says, Amar Karna, normally miun means something else. Normally miun means when a girl is married off as an orphan, she has the right, if she's under 12, to reject the marriage. But here in this context, it means that we perform this act of miun, which you'll see why in a moment. So the Gemara says, Amar Karna Dvarim Bego. Karna says these words don't make any sense. Im get, if it's a divorce, Lama miun, then if we require a get, why does she have to do this rejection of the marriage? Miun. And if it's miun, lama get, then why does she need a get? So Amrulay, Hamar Ukfa Ubeidina. This is the position of Mar Ukfa and the Beidina, Bikafri. Now what do they say? So this is the position of. So it says this is the position of the Beis Din who in Kafri. So Avchua. So when they went to ask the question, when they sent a message to ask this question, they reversed it. They reversed Karna and Shmuel's position. They say that Shmuel said that what Karna said didn't make sense. They sent it to Rav. And why did they do this? Is a whole another question. So one of the positions is that Rashi says that the reason is because since Rav was so close with Shmuel, they were concerned that maybe as a result of this, Rav would agree with Shmuel's position, even though he doesn't really follow his logic, and they'll be concerned, and they'll be concerned to require a get, and miun, and so therefore they reverse positions to make sure they really got Rav's real position, and so therefore, since for sure he wouldn't be strict in the positions where Shmuel is coming to be lenient. So that's one position. They were so concerned that Rav would agree with Shmuel. And there's other positions, obviously, it's a big discussion. However, the Gemara, Rashi and Gittin says that they just reversed it by accident. Anyway, so the Shadrul Kamei, Rav Amalu Hayalo Kim, he takes an oath. Tzricha get, Tzricha miun. He says, I agree with Shmuel. Excuse me, and he said, meaning to say he agrees with Shmuel, but not the way Shmuel was reported to him. It says, and I have mercy on the descendants of Abba Barab, which is Shmuel's name, the Nemachi, who could say, why, if you need a get, why do you need miun? If you need a miun, why do you need a get? For time of mind, what's the reason why it requires both? Amarav, he could tzricha get, Shema Nisratav the Kiddushin. requires a get, then maybe the father agrees with the Kiddushin, maybe retroactively, or maybe somehow or other he agrees with it. But tzricha miyun, shema onesratza b'Kiddushin. That means to say, why does she require the miyun? Because maybe she didn't. Maybe the father doesn't agree with the Kiddushin. It wasn't valid, and so therefore she has to show she rejects it. Yomer ein Kiddushin tovsim b'chosa. And so therefore we might be concerned. We have to make a public declaration. That's not a marriage. Because people might have thought in the case where then the husband went and betrothed her sister, they might have said, oh, it doesn't take effect there because he's married to the other sister already. But we're saying, no, the Kiddushin does take effect biblically there. And so she would need a divorce, and that's the sister would need a divorce. Rav Nachman says that which Rav and Shmuel said, that maybe the father agrees with it. That's in the case of Husha Shitchu. They only said this in the case where they had already spoken about a shidduch between them, and so therefore the relationship had already existed. So there we're concerned that maybe the father agreed. And Ula Amar, Ula says it's not a get whatsoever, it's not a marriage whatsoever. She doesn't even require a miyun, there's no get. We're not concerned from the Kiddushin at all. And Afa, so the Gemara says, Afa gav teshikhu. The Gemara says, even though they already were talking in Shidduchin, so the Gemara says, no, man the masniya, the one who says who doesn't record the position of Ula. But meaning to say, if they were shitchu, if they would have been discussing a marriage, and Ula would have said, yeah, they should require a miyun and a get. He could have an alternative version that Ula says, that a minor girl who was betrothed without the consent of her father doesn't even require miyun. It's not a marriage at all. So Masav Rav Kahana, Mikuna Mesu or Miyununis Garshon Pushinim to Ilinus, Sarasam Mutaros. So you know what? We'll stop here. God willing, we'll pick this up when we do the daf tonight at 8 o'clock. We'll review it, and also tonight, God willing, we'll do the daf. Yashakoach to everybody.